death was evidence of their humanity, they often commented on Indian confusion or skepticism toward the resurrection of the flesh. In his late 16th century survey of Virginia, Thomas Harriot noted that the local natives thought that the colonists at Roanoke held a magical power over diseases and therefore supposed that we were men of an old generation many years past, then risen again to immortality. In the 1640s, Roger Williams's Guide to Algonquin Language and Culture observed that though the natives hold the soul to live forever, they die and mourn without hope, because they do not expect resurrection. Advocating for the conversion of the enslaved people of Barbados, Anglican royalist Richard Lygon noted that the island's black population were not altogether of the afterlife-denying sect of the Sadducees, for they believe a resurrection and that they shall go on into their own country again and have their youth renewed. This conviction was a potential source of resistance and rebellion, as the slaves could threaten their owners with suicide, safe in their conviction that death would improve their lot. Although such superstition ostensibly confirmed Lygon's presumption that Africans were inherently intellectually inferior to Europeans, he also framed it as a standing reproach to the English Barbadians who allowed their enslaved people to persist in their ignorance. But belief in and about resurrection did more than just delimit the boundaries between Christian and pagan, civilized and savage. Throughout the American colonial period, devotional, controversial and speculative writing on the subject addressed questions of religious, social and political identity. The translation of the Church itself, from earth to heaven, was a mainstay of all varieties of Christian eschatology. Building on this principle, Protestant ministers described the persistence of more narrowly defined corporate bodies and affiliations into the next world. In the 1630s and 1640s, Massachusetts Puritans John Cotton and Thomas Shepard imagined institutional and theological continuities between their own New England Congregationalism and the eschatological Church triumphant. Around the turn of the 18th century, Cotton Mather reconfigured their vision. Now that New England was more closely integrated into the English-British Empire, it was less expedient to picture the kingdom of God along Puritan lines. But while he portrayed the perfected Church of the Millennium as an evolution of global Protestantism rather than one of denomination in particular, Mather still insisted that New England's unique story would outlast the end of secular time. The spirit of Congregationalism would live on through the resurrection of the colony's many departed saints, who, along with their counterparts from other countries, would serve as the governors of the new earth. Mather thought that these believers would take on a luminescent appearance when they returned from the grave. Some of his friends and colleagues, including Boston magistrate Samuel Sewall, wondered instead whether resurrection would lighten the skin of African saints. The assumption that black bodies were incompatible with immortality reflected a widespread reluctance to offer Christians of colour religious and political equality in this life. Toward the end of the 18th century, some of the first African writers to be published in English contested this prejudice, insisting that black people would be admitted to heaven. Controversy over the nature of resurrected existence was nothing new. The patristic and medieval eras produced a wide variety of interpretations of the Bible's often confusing pronouncements on resurrection. But colonial authors, as one would expect, were more directly influenced by the English and European Protestants who overturned eschatological convention at the beginning of the 17th century. By arguing that the 1,000-year reign of Christ, described in the book of Revelation, was yet to begin, these theologians enabled new ways of understanding the general resurrection's place in sacred history. Revelation's prediction that some of the dead would be resurrected 1,000 years before the rest in the first resurrection was particularly evocative, apparently referring to the revitalization of the church or the literal resurrection of some or all of the righteous departed long before the damned were summoned to face their doom. These millennialist beliefs were held by a significant number of those who took the parliamentary side in the British and Irish Civil Wars and were especially popular among Oliver Cromwell's New Model Army. American Puritans who shared these opinions were enthused by the possibility that they might gain more ground in England, Scotland and Ireland. More troublingly, the virtual suspension of government censorship in England during the interregnum facilitated the circulation of a variety of heretical views, including the idea that the resurrection was an allegory for the spiritual elevation of the true believer